Welcome to MSL Talk with Tom Caravela, a podcast specifically designed for MSLs and all things field medical. Hey guys, welcome to the podcast. My guest today is Ruchit Parikh. He is Associate Director of Medical Affairs Strategy and Training at CTI Biopharma. And we talk about market access, what it is and how it relates to the MSL role. So this is a great conversation. I hope you guys enjoy it. Don't forget to follow me on LinkedIn. Check us out on YouTube. All our videos are up there. And don't forget to join us for MSL Talk Live, which is the first Tuesday of every month at 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time. And that's on LinkedIn Live. Hey, Ruchit, welcome to the podcast. How you doing, buddy?
Hey, Tom, I'm good. How are you?
I'm awesome. I'm excited. Really looking forward to this topic and can't wait to get into it. And guys, just so you know, this is one of these things that just kind of developed. Ruchit reached out to me and we started talking and I'm like, hey, you know what? Why don't you come on and came up with this idea of doing an episode on market access. We haven't done this before, totally novel idea. So I'm really excited to learn more about what market access is, how it relates to MSLs and medical affairs. But before we do that, Richard, why don't you introduce yourself?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Tom, thank you obviously for having me on. And of course, thank you for putting on the MSL Talk podcast. I've actually spoken with a few colleagues of mine in the industry, and the consensus is mutual that these sessions are very beneficial to all of us, whether we're seasoned MSLs or aspiring MSLs. So thank you for that.
Appreciate it.
So my name is Ruchit Parikh. I am Associate Director of Medical Affairs Strategy and Training at CTI Biopharma. I'm kind of in a hybrid role right now where I also function as an MSL, so I have field responsibilities, but I also am responsible for training the team and working on field medical strategy. So happy to be on the call today and talk a little bit about what I've done related to market access.
Awesome. Yeah. And before we get started, we actually do have a sponsor for today's podcast. So our sponsor today is Larval. And if you guys might be familiar with that name, Bruno Larval, who's the founder of the company, was on my podcast. He's awesome. If you haven't checked out those episodes, please do so. The company was established in 2004 and combines the best of artificial and human intelligence to deliver expertly curated and personalized data solutions to medical affairs, competitive intelligence, commercial, and R&D teams within the pharmaceutical and biotech industry. So for more info, please visit them at larval.com. Check these guys out. Great company. You should definitely know who they are. So let's get into the market access idea. So to start, I think the first question is like, where does market access sit in the pharmaceutical industry and as it kind of relates to medical affairs? That's kind of the first question that pops into my mind.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So I think let's take a step back. Let's talk about what market access is.
Okay.
So market access is a department within a pharmaceutical or biotech company that ensures that patients can get the drug that they've been prescribed within a timely manner while addressing, and I think these are kind of the two key components here, reimbursement and affordability. So the ultimate objective of a market access department is to ensure product availability through trade and distribution partners like a Cardinal Health, a McKesson, or AmerisourceBergen, and patient access and reimbursement by commercial plans. And by commercial plans, I mean Aetna and United Healthcare, et cetera, and also government payers. So going back to your question, market access, where does it sit within a pharma or biotech? It usually is an independent function, and it has several subsets. So there's departments that sit underneath market access, like trade and distribution, which I mentioned, pricing and contracting, and one of the most important ones is patient support services.
I always and don't go by me because I really don't know, but I always thought market access was that sat under the commercial organization. Is that typical?
Again, it depends on the company. I've seen cases where they can sit under commercial. For us here at CTI, it's independent, but we work very closely. So they work very closely with commercial. They work very closely with medical affairs. So I guess it depends on the company.
Got you. Yeah, it's funny. You don't think about it, but a company develops a drug, gets approved, and then we just magically think that it just appears on shelves,
Right.
right? But it doesn't. There's a whole department that's responsible for that. Is that why this piece is so important?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you hit the nail right there on the head. So it's important to have an effective market access team, but also an effective market access strategy, because without that, you can have, as you say, the best product in the world, but without having coverage or reimbursement, patients are going to have a really difficult time accessing it. So market access ensures that the product that's prescribed for the patient is covered by their insurance, and they also address the affordability concerns that can come up and help a patient get access to a drug if they do have some of these affordability concerns.
All right. So I'm going to go back to something you just said. So you said market access team, which means that there's a market access department, there's market access folks that are out in the field. Are they like MSLs? And what do market access reps or market access professionals on this market access team do?
Yeah, absolutely. So you do have certain pharmaceutical companies will have field reimbursement managers. Here at CTI, our sales reps or our key account managers actually act as our field reimbursement managers. So they're responsible for communicating that we have a patient assistance program, we have back-end patient support services, drug is available X, Y, and Z, it's positioned here on a formulary. So they're the ones that communicate that and provide any support that's needed to the provider or to the institution to make sure that the patient gets the appropriate medication at the right time.
Got you. Okay. So then let's talk about the MSLs.
Yeah.
What do MSLs need to know about market access? And are MSL teams educated and trained on market access and what market access is all about?
Yeah, no, it's a fantastic question. So MSLs and medical affairs play a vital role and work collaboratively with market access teams. So prior to the launch of a drug, the market access team will work on scheduling clinical presentations with payers, specialty pharmacies, et cetera. And these clinical presentations are typically delivered by the MSL. So these presentations will set the stage for payers to understand your disease state and your product. Now, most MSLs are not educated or trained on market access. I actually didn't know much about it until I attended business school and actually found myself in a consulting role prior to becoming an MSL, where I worked on going to market strategies for drugs with a companion diagnostic. So I kind of had to learn about what the differences and the nuances there are. But basically, MSLs are not really educated or trained on the various responsibilities of a market access team.
Yeah, again, it's just something that happens, magically in the background.
Right.
It's like, yeah, nothing to see here. This is just going on, and everybody else goes about their business.
Yeah, but it's very important. I mean, this team is vital to ensuring that a drug is launched, and also that patients have access to it.
Absolutely, 1,000%, because there's situations where access is a real issue for certain companies. And that obviously is going to have a huge impact on performance and sales and the profitability and success of the company, the launch, and what's going to happen with that organization. Even when you look at how important this is, if there are access issues, it creates a bottleneck for the organization in every other way, including when it comes to the venture capital side and funding and making sure investors are happy. If you have an issue in the beginning, like at the forefront, where you're not able to get the right access for a drug, you're in trouble.
Yeah, no, I completely agree.
Yeah. So what about, and that kind of makes me think that this has to look different in different size companies. I imagine that smaller companies have different challenges and differences with larger companies. What's your experience been?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's definitely challenges, but also opportunities. If you kind of think about market access teams and how they differ from large pharma to medium-sized pharma to small pharma or biotech, size, obviously, the size of the team is probably the first thing that comes to mind, right? They might have teams and by they, I mean larger pharma might have teams specific for a therapeutic area or even branching across several therapeutic areas, whereas smaller companies will have it potentially one therapeutic area, one product. So that's kind of the first thing. The other thing is the strategy. The strategy probably differs, depending on the size of the pharmaceutical company and also the number of approved products you have. So the go-to-market strategy or the market access strategy for someone like where I'm at, CTI, may differ from a larger pharmaceutical company with a broader portfolio.
Got you. That makes sense. And then what about, let's get back to the MSLs. So what do the MSLs need to know or do, or how do they relate to market access? What, do they have responsibilities as it relates to market access?
Yeah, absolutely. So we talked a little bit about the clinical presentations, right? So the MSLs are the experts during these clinical presentations. We're responsible for knowing our disease state and our product. It's also important for us to do a little bit of homework prior to engaging in these clinical presentations. So you want to understand the payer that you're speaking to, who's on the other side of that table or that conversation. Are they big or are they small? And by that, I mean, how many patient lives do they cover? Where are your competitors positioned on their formulary? Understanding what the process is like post-approval to get your drug on their formulary. So it's a good idea to have a sense of some of these things when you're prepping for a clinical presentation so that you can answer questions that come up more effectively.
Got you. Yeah, because so you have MSLs on the medical affairs side, you have your commercial counterparts on the sales side, so sales reps, and then you have these market access folks that are on the reimbursement side, right? So you have these kind of three areas that are somewhat interchangeable, so to speak, are all kind of working.
They're all working together. I mean, if you think about, kind of gears all working together, that's basically how I see it.
And then what, I have to imagine that there are gaps that exist in that equation of some sort.
Yeah. So I think if you kind of think of gaps, I wouldn't say that there are gaps between market access or medical affairs. I think these two departments work very closely together. Medical affairs has a hand in developing the AMCP dossier, which AMCP stands for the Academy of Managed Care Pharmacy. And that document, very extensive, very detailed, contains the clinical and economic evidence, which is the information that payers request to ultimately make their formulary coverage decisions, their reimbursement decisions. So medical affairs plays a huge role in developing that document. In addition, all the information that's shared during clinical presentations, that's all created and owned by medical affairs. So again, we play a huge role in all of that as well. If anything, I'd say the gaps exist between MSLs and not really knowing or understanding the role of market access. And I'd actually encourage every MSL that kind of has an interest in learning more about it to look up things online. There are various resources available online, but also connect with internal stakeholders. I think these folks are probably your best bet to learn a little bit about market access and the role that medical affairs, but also MSLs play. Right.
And then so now as I'm hearing you and I'm trying to put this all together, and being on the recruiting side, you always look at this in the idea of titles that exist.
Yeah.
So you have your MSLs, and again, we talked about the market access folks and the sales folks, but then there's managed care MSLs or medical outcomes liaisons or health outcomes liaisons. So how does that fit into this?
Yeah, I mean, so they all play a role here. The titles obviously are different and the responsibilities may differ. So managed care liaisons may work more closely with payers or even larger institutions, as opposed to working, in the community as much, or with individual key opinion leaders. Health economic outcomes liaisons obviously kind of work more on the back end where they're looking for data and kind of work on that to further develop your story or your messaging. So again, different titles. There's a little bit of interchangeability depending on the company. Here kind of at CTI, we have our hands kind of all over and in multiple pots because we're a smaller company. We wear many hats. So we're doing a little bit of all this.
Yeah. The thing that's exciting though, it just hearing you talk and having this conversation, it's a great time to be in pharma, to be in medical affairs, and to be field-based and know all this stuff. Because years ago, when I first started in my business, this stuff didn't exist.
right.
You had your sales reps, you had your MSLs, you had, your folks on the reimbursement side, but it just seems like there's so much more opportunity now to either get promoted or morph into and transition into other roles that are field-based that exist within pharma and biotech. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, our boss here at CTI on the medical side says this all the time. I totally agree with her that the MSL is probably the best role in pharma, but I'm obviously biased. But yeah, it is a great time. There's a need for folks in these roles. There's a need for folks that have experience in these roles, but also folks that are eager and willing to learn. So I completely agree with you. I think this is kind of the golden age of, field medical affairs.
Yeah. And you mentioned, when we talked, you mentioned to me, you mentioned a term, unicorn of skills. So tell everyone what you mean by that and what that is.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is kind of based on what I've heard. So folks may not agree. But I've spoken to several folks in the industry. I've heard it from a couple of folks. But if you're looking to break into or even grow in an MSL role, there are a couple of things to have. So the first is launch experience. It's important to launch a drug or a diagnostic. Having experience working with commercial, compliantly working with commercial is also very important. And then finally, having what we're talking about today is payer or market access experience. Mm-hmm. Those kind of round out the unicorn of skills. Outside of that, I think MSLs build relationships both internally and externally. So maintaining a high clinical acumen as a medical affairs colleague, but balancing it appropriately and tailoring your messaging to your audience. Because this, you've spoken to several people on the podcast, that we don't just talk to one type of person. We talk to folks across the spectrum here, both internally and externally. So you have to understand how to tailor your message and articulate it clearly so that it's compelling to whoever you're speaking to. So that kind of ties into.
Got you. Yeah, I love it. And so MSLs that are out there that want to learn more about this, like, where do they go to learn more about market access and some of the stuff we're talking about?
Yeah, absolutely. So great question. And I think it's important because there's a wealth of information available online, right? And it can actually be overwhelming. So I would first start by asking yourself a question, like, what do I want to learn specifically about market access? And I think that kind of guides you to where you can look for information. I've used LinkedIn. I think that's a fantastic resource. They've got some pretty basic information on there. We mentioned AMCP, the Academy of Managed Care Pharmacy. They've got a pretty cool website, very detailed information on there. MMIT, which stands for Managed Markets Insight and Technology, is also a great website, and they have a monthly newsletter that goes out that provides you with monthly updates. But the biggest and probably best bet, and we talk a little bit about this too, is talk to your internal colleagues. Reach out to that person in market access. It doesn't matter where they sit in market access. Ask them a question. There's probably mutual interest there, and you're working towards a mutual goal. So it actually probably makes more sense to talk to that person first, so you can learn about what you're working on directly. So that's kind of the guidance that I would give folks that are interested.
Yeah, those are awesome resources, guys. Definitely rewind that, write those down, check them out if you're looking to find more information. And so, Ruchit, as we're talking right now, we're finishing out 2022. We're getting ready for 2023. Where do you see things going for MSLs, and what advice do you have for the MSL that wants to be a top performer in 2023?
Yeah, this is guidance for any MSL. It's not just to be a top performer, but be eager, be willing to take on new things, be willing to learn, kind of step out of your comfort zone, take on a new task, even if it's tough. Like, you have colleagues that are around you, and I know we're field-based, so it might seem like you're disconnected, but chances are you're probably part of a team, so you can reach out to folks to get help or to understand something that you may not understand. But I think take the risks, take the steps to learn something new. That, I think, is kind of the best guidance that I can give.
That's great advice. And what about challenges? Like, what do you expect to happen? And obviously, we're in this never-ending phase of there's always something that comes up that you don't expect, right? We're post-COVID. People are still in this hybrid, environment where we're trying to get FaceTime, and sometimes that's virtual, sometimes that's in person. But what challenges do you expect MSLs to face in 2023?
Yeah, I mean, access, as you just mentioned, is probably a really big challenge. I think the other thing is you have to understand that our HCPs and our KOLs are have less time. Like it seems like they have less and less time.
Yep.
There's 3 to 5 people from each company pulling them in different directions, right? The sales rep needs some time, the MSL needs some time, maybe your pub team is reaching out to them to do, for a publication that they're an author on. So being mindful of that, I found that being very respectful of their time and understanding that, oh, if my colleague has reached out to you this month, like I might not need to, unless obviously there's something that we need to talk about. So being respectful, and I think that is also going to be a challenge, is that they're so pressed for time. Sometimes a 30-minute meeting is not going to be 30 minutes, it'll be 5 minutes. So just, being flexible, which we obviously know is one of the key skills that an MSL needs to have.
Yeah, no, for sure. Especially now.
Yeah.
I think that the one thing that we've learned is that the KOLs are going to dictate the cadence and the pace at which things go and the mode by which they want to communicate. So I think if you're not flexible, you're not doing yourself any kind of justice.
Absolutely. No, I completely agree.
So what about, we always like to talk about, and there's a lot of folks that listen to this podcast that are looking to break into the pharmaceutical industry and are trying to get their first MSL role. So put yourself back in their shoes. What advice would you give those folks as they're trying to break into industry?
Yeah, just be persistent. Don't give up. I didn't break into the role on my first interview, but you can learn something from each interview, right? Where you need to improve on. So that's probably the biggest advice I would give is don't shy away. If you don't get a role, go back and review what you did, how you interviewed, where you think, you had some weaknesses, where you can, kind of gain some more insight into the role. There's obviously a ton of us in the community, so reach out to us. We're happy to chat as well. But I think that's basically it. Like, don't give up. It's not an overnight process. It's going to take a while. You might not get it on your first or second try, but I think you can learn from every single time you interview to ultimately get the role. I think the other thing that is important is, kind of when I talk to aspiring MSLs is don't just blanket apply to every MSL role that's on the internet. Try to tailor it based on your clinical experiences. If you've got a lot of experience, in anti-infectives, go for something in that area. Antivirals, go for something, focused on that. Don't just apply to everything across the board. If you've got experience in oncology, shoot for oncology roles. So that's kind of what I would say.
That's great advice. Absolutely. I mean, you really want to sell yourself and your scientific value proposition, because that's what's going to get people's attention. If you just are throwing your resume and CV out there without any real specific approach or tailored approach, you're doing yourself a disservice. It's just going to wind up going in a big black hole, probably.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Final thoughts. I'll let you kind of close this out, as this was a great conversation, by the way. I learned a lot. But final thoughts, anything, what kind of advice or any kind of final thoughts you want to share with folks listening?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I'd like to just kind of wrap up talking about market access. Again, it's a very important function within a pharmaceutical company. And I think that as medical affairs, as MSLs, we work very collaboratively with market access, right? It's important to understand the different roles and responsibilities of each team so that we can work together. So if you don't have that experience, if you're eager to kind of get that experience or to learn something new, I'd encourage folks to kind of reach out to people. You can reach out to me, you can reach out to people within your company to learn a little bit more. And then just advice for aspiring MSLs, don't give up. I mean, if this is truly something that you want to do, where you see yourself growing, don't give up, just keep trying. Keep learning from each experience that you have and tie it all in. It's all about how you, I think you said it, Tom, sell yourself, right? How are you telling your story and what value can you bring to a company that's either growing or looking for, an MSL in a territory that's maybe new? How do you do that?
Yeah, for sure. That's great advice. And hey, man, it's a great time. We're going into a new year, and I want to wish everybody all the luck in the world. I hope you guys crush it. I hope you set really good goals right now so that you can get after it with intention and you're going out there with purpose. And a year from now, you can look back and say, wow, man, I crushed all my goals. So that's my hope for you guys. I wish you all the best. Rucha, thanks for joining me, man. You were amazing. Really good.
Hey, Tom, thank you for having me. I appreciated seeing you a couple of weeks ago. Appreciated the time on the podcast here. I really hope that the viewers find this valuable. Happy to do it anytime again. And if I could just close out by saying thank you to TMAC, the medical affairs company, who gave me my first role as an MSL, but also my current company, CTI Biopharma. It's a fantastic, fantastic organization. And of course, thank you, Tom.
Yeah, man. Hey, listen, and you know what? I'm glad that you mentioned that. Guys, when you're in medical affairs, you're in any profession, it's a body of work. You have to start somewhere and build and grow. So all the advice that Rucha is giving you and the stuff that we're talking about now, as far as, reaching out to people, how to apply to jobs, networking, and building out your career, just remember, just each day you want to do a little bit to move that needle. Invest in yourself, invest in your career, invest in your resume, your relationships, LinkedIn, mentorship, networking. It all adds up. And again, be goal oriented so that you have a target that you're shooting for. And before you know it, you're going to wind up like Ruchit, where you got your first role, your second role, you're advancing in your career, and the future is really bright. So
couldn't have said it better, Tom.
We'll leave it at that. Yeah, man. So guys, all the best. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time. Thank you so much for listening to the show. If you've enjoyed it, please subscribe so that you don't miss episodes in the future, and feel free to leave a rating or a review or a comment. Thanks again, and I look forward to seeing you again soon.